I'm wearing overalls today. So, let's chat Sanderson. It's happened. I have finally finished the first trilogy of the Mistborn series. I know it's a different version. I ordered all three. Book one got lost. So this is the Canadian version I'm left with. But let's talk about it. So if you're unfamiliar with the Mistborn trilogy, this centers around a young girl named Vin and an older man named Kelsier, as they are Mistborn, meaning essentially they can ingest various forms of metal and it will give them different powers. Enhanced hearing, the ability to move metals, all of that kind of thing. You're a Mistborn. So, this series, obviously it's a 5 out of 5 star series, but in saying that, there are some points I would like to go over. So in the first book, we're definitely following a motley crew of characters 1,000 years after the Dark Lord won. The atmosphere is 10 out of 10 in this book. Ash is falling from the sky. It is a very gray world. Plants are no longer green. Sanderson does a really good job in creating this dystopian, really hopeless atmosphere for our heroes. The band of characters in this are fantastic, and it carries on through book 2 and 3. The banter is great. I will say my favorite characters being Sazed, Vin, and Kelsier. Honestly, I think Elle is kind of overhyped, to be honest, and he of course is the male protagonist in book 2 and 3, aka Vin's love interest. I will say that the romance is very, very light in this series, so if that's a deterrent for you, do not fear. It is really glazed over most of the trilogy, which I appreciate. So as a character, in terms of character work, I think Sanderson did a really good job of creating essentially what is martyrdom, how a revolution starts, what is needed to fuel it. Oftentimes, I think in series, we just see that it is very reliant on just a movement is only as good as like its people, but really there has to be a spearhead for a movement, especially when whatever overarching power seems very overwhelming. And I think book 1 did a really good job of putting the roots into a revolution, whereas book 2 and 3 really focused on what progresses after the initial bang of a movement. So book 1, 5 out of 5 stars. Cried at the end, loved all the characters. In saying that, it is a 5 out of 5 series, but not all 3 books were 5 out of 5. So next we have Well of Ascension. In this book, I rated it 4 stars. It wasn't the fault necessarily of the book. I just think this focuses more heavily on political atmosphere after a revolution, and in doing that, naturally, it is a little more sluggish, and starting off a series with such a bang, it is hard to follow up. And I do think this had a smidge of second book syndrome, not enough that I didn't enjoy myself or didn't rate it very highly, but it certainly, there was, after the initial wow of an ending of the first book, we find ourselves almost immediately after what's happened. There's no like grand time jump of multiple years, and this focuses heavily on Vin and how she is dealing with her new fame and new reverie of the people and everything like that. And without getting into spoilers, they're also struggling with the wins and losses that come with any revolution. This focuses more on Elle as well and his development as a character. And while I'll say that it was time well spent, because in book 1 I really didn't like Elle at all, and by book 2 I begin to understand him more and certainly understand the appeal in which it's needed to balance out Vin's character and why their relationship works well. At the end of the day, I still can't help but feel he was one of the most flat characters. Probably why I gave this book a 4-star instead of a 5-star, because we do focus a lot on that development, and for it to surmount to essentially was a little bit of a disappointment, but I will take it because it was still a fantastic world. And also, I think one of the most underhyped points of the Well of Ascension is we get to see Sazed or Sazed grow instrumentally in terms of the revolution, in terms of his own personal growth and relationships, and it was phenomenal to watch because he's one of my favorite characters in the series, and Sanderson lets us spend a lot of time with him. So that one was a 4-star. Then we hop back into Hero of Ages. So the way I'm talking about these, this being a 5-star, this being a 4-star, I rate them by themselves as standalone books in a part of a series versus the series as a whole. So for this book, I'm sorry to say I gave it a high 3.75, maybe a 4-star. So this book, I will say I don't think it had to be 750 pages. While I thought it was a phenomenal ending and I thought it was a lot of fun, I think together there's so much political atmosphere in this one that it could have done without some of it in Hero of Ages. And while I really enjoyed myself and Vin really came through at the end and the ending had me weeping like a child without their bottle, I still have to point out what I view as flaws in this series, which is we really spend a lot of time with Elle in this one. And maybe I'm just, in hearing this, I feel like my complaints are just I don't like Elle. But that's not it. I promise. It's more the fact that where there is, if you're very interested in political intrigue and just the dialogues that have to happen, you will really enjoy this. And to some extent, I am. When I read Game of Thrones, like, certainly those are the more intriguing things I found. But with Hero of Ages, it wasn't scheming. It wasn't necessarily planning. It was just talking. There's just a lot of talking and not talking for character growth. It's just a lot of conversations. And I felt like this could have done with an editor. But it delivered at the end. And what I see as a very strong ending is not easy to do when you're following up from such a strong book one. And I think Sanderson must have started book one knowing exactly how this was going to end, because even though I knew the end it had to end the way it did for it to be a perfect arc and a beautiful sort of full circle to book one. It was still really hard because you grow so attached to this world and these characters and what they're fighting for, that to see the highs and lows of a revolution and martyrdom and what that means and how that trickles down, it's really difficult. But I will say, boy, did I put faith in the right characters, because they all delivered at the end and I had a lot of fun. So that being said, as a series, I definitely rate it 5 out of 5 stars. I had so much fun with it. And I'm a little hesitant to pick up the second trilogy in the Mistborn series because I grew so attached with these characters. I know the second trilogy takes place 300 years after these years we spend with these characters. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to manage and reinvest my heart and time into these characters. But one thing I have learned is Brandon Sanderson does not disappoint me, and the man knows how to deliver great characters, a very fleshed out fantasy world, and a really cool magic system. And that is essentially what I got from these. A very cool magic system, a really atmospheric fantasy, and really great characters that I'm sure I will hold on to for a very long time to come. God, I love Sanderson. I love him. I can't believe that I'm filming this 1 year to the day of my first journey into fantasy. And I started it with Sanderson, and 1 year in, I'm finishing my first finished trilogy of Sanderson, and it's just crazy. So thank you so much for watching. I really don't have an outro. I don't. So I will see you in my next video.